Welcome to Blockchain 2025. We explore how blockchain technology will affect major industries in the future.
Each episode dissects one industry, how it currently works, why blockchain can disrupt it, and some blockchain projects trying to be the solution.
Blockchain 2025 is part of the Bitcoin.com podcast network. Learn about Bitcoin, create a wallet, and buy your first Satoshis all at Bitcoin.com.
Welcome to episode number 4 of season 2 of Blockchain 2025. This is Matt Aaron.
Hello there, this is Stuart. Glad to be back with you today, Matt. Where are you? Where are you calling me from?
I'm calling you from the Dominican Republic, here in Santo Domingo.
You get about a bit.
Yeah, it's lovely. I'm having a good time. It's an interesting place. I never explored this country before.
Marvelous, glad to hear it.
Yeah, man. What about you?
Still in Serbia, in sunny Belgrade. Well, it's dark, but it was sunny, so that's fine.
So question for you, man. How cold does Belgrade get in the winter?
It's not so bad anymore. It used to get pretty cold, but I think in Europe in general, the winters have actually got a lot milder. I remember as a young boy in Scotland, maybe just nostalgically, the snowy winters, but now it's just rain and wind, which is the worst combination, of course.
Cool, man. And so you got any trips planned in Serbia?
Well, yeah, they're probably going to go to a place called Tara National Park soon, which actually has wolves and bears running free. It's one of the last sort of wild areas of Europe where you can still get mauled to death by a bear if you're not careful. So going to go down there. It's beautiful as well.
Well, you got to be careful, man. We need you for this podcast. I don't want to have to say, welcome to episode 5. Stuart's not here. He got mauled by a bear.
He's that Scottish guy that got mauled by a bear in Serbia. Yeah. No, definitely not, no. I'll stay safe.
Cool, man. Well, listeners, as always, we're going to ask you, you know the drill. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a review, share this, because, people want to hear Stuart and what he has to say about blockchain. And we did one last week, so check that episode out. But today we have a pretty interesting, and I'd say when you look at it, it's relevant to everyone on Earth. What is today's industry, Stuart?
Yeah, I think you're correct in saying it's relevant to everyone on Earth, and it's black markets. So basically any sort of underground economy, shadow economy, or clandestine market which has some aspect of illegality or some non-compliant behavior with state or institutional laws.
Okay, and sorry, Stuart, I'm going to interrupt you there.
Sure.
I just want to say something, right? People think black market, there are those types of things like selling machine guns and truly defined black markets, and there's some awful stuff on there like, human trafficking, things like that we can all agree on are not great, or child porn. But there's also things, informal jobs that don't pay taxes make up a
definitely not
large percentage of that. And that can be someone in South America just selling tortillas at the corner of a busy intersection, right? That's not registered, where it's very difficult to be registered. Or someone in a small village in Africa that turns their car into a taxi service, right? That informally does that. So there's all sorts of labor that go down on the black market, both things that seem like normal jobs to us and, of course, some pretty dark stuff.
Yeah, I mean, any way to sort of subvert the tax system is essentially black market, constitutes working in the black market. And I think we could go into the state of affairs with large companies subverting the tax system using so-called legal routes. But yeah, the black market touches everything. Every product, every well-known brand you use, it has some sort of counterfeit somewhere. It has many counterfeits in many places, actually.
For sure. You can't buy an iPhone, which has parts from countries all over the world and so forth. There's no way that one part on there is 100% above board. I just don't think it's possible. That's not really blaming Apple. I just think it's logistically complex and hard to know.
Well, of course. And actually, a survey was done where allegedly 3/4 of the world's total economic activity could be classed as the black market. Actually, only 1/4 of them are what's called the formal economy, where professional and paid work and tax statements are paid, and that attributes to the GDP of the country. So actually, GDPs are all quite probably just arbitrary numbers. Most of the economic activity goes on behind the scenes.
For sure. And for those that know about the crisis in Greece and how they cook the books, with help from Goldman Sachs, and I got that from Michael Lewis's book, Boomerang. Great author, also wrote The Big Short. which is a very famous movie, that was just socially accepted that they weren't paying their taxes.
Yeah.
So pretty much all of the economy of Greece you could consider to be somewhat of a black market.
Yeah, I've spent a reasonable amount of time in Greece, and I can attest that even today it has a penchant for the slightly more grey areas when it comes to paying taxes in the black market. But that's what makes Greece great at the same time, beautiful country. But yeah, I mean, the actual global estimates of the black market are in the trillions of dollars. The drug market alone is up to $700 billion a year in illicit drugs. It's probably much more than that. At the end of the day, when drugs are actually stopped and caught, that's the ones that get caught. The huge amount of them that get through are never even part of this. So all these numbers are all kind of, let's say, wishy-washy in some ways, but it's interesting to see the size of these markets.
For sure. There's no doubt that it's quite a lot. And you see the stat, it would be the second largest economy in the world. There's no doubt that the black markets are huge. I think we've established that. Stuart, what else is interesting about, we'll say, the traditional black market economies that people may not know?
Well, I think there's quite a lot of them within our own communities right now. I mean, I can attest, even in Serbia, during the 90s, obviously I wasn't there, luckily, but many of my friends and even sort of extended family now were. And I've heard all sorts of stories, first-hand accounts of how black markets function, basically where states cannot, They keep the black markets are essential to keeping the cogs of civilization turning, or some sort of civilization turning, when states have basically disappeared. And that very much happened here during the sanctions, the NATO bombing and such, where things such as toys, for example, a good friend of mine, his father made a reasonably good income during the war selling toys. Basically just going to Hungary and importing them, paying the certain people you need to pay to get them in the country. And toys had a huge markup. That's a slightly stranger example. You would think booze and cigarettes and all these things. Of course, they're standard. They're the stalwarts of the black market. But you sometimes forget what can happen in these situations, and things like toys actually become luxury commodities and can command huge prices.
Yeah. Right, like you said, just one example. And I think in many parts of the world, it would be difficult to actually do things by the books because a lot of these bureaucracies, I know like Suriname, it takes 180 days to form a business. So someone in the US may lack the perspective of how things are in the rest of the world. I know China is a whole complex circus as well. In a lot of countries, it doesn't really make sense to do things. It will be impractical, I should say, to actually do things, quote unquote, above board.
Yeah, if not impractical, just inefficient. And for many people, they don't want to pay those extra taxes or however they feel. It can just be slow. It takes ages. I remember there was a motherboard article or a video, and the same product that would take 3 months to get made in America took 3 weeks to do in China. Now, some of that was above board, but many of the aspects of getting that product made were via the black market. He can get his product to market in 3 weeks instead of 3 months by not jumping through all these legal loopholes. So it really serves as a grease or the oil to lubricate what in many ways are old, creaky mechanisms that can't handle today's fast-paced commerce.
Yeah, very interesting.
So, I mean, we have some further examples. There's a great one I can go into. I say great, it's actually a harrowing tale, but it's a first-person account of how black markets form in a so-called shit-hit-the-fan situation. Again, this comes from the Balkans, and it was in Bosnia, where the protagonist was basically left to fend for himself with his family in a city of 6,000 people without water, electricity, gasoline, medical help, any of these types of things. And it's a fascinating blog. Everyone should read it. If you search for A Year in Hell, Shit Hits the Fan, you'll find it. But it's a real account of these times. And it's funny to find that basically things like gold and silver, of course, are used to barter. But what is more important is the black markets for things like lighter fluid, toilet paper, antibiotics, things in the normal world that we see as just absolutely, I can go and get this whenever. Actually, something like a lighter becomes more precious than many of our, an iPhone's not very precious when you can't light fire and you die of hyperthermia. So the black markets actually are flexible and they are completely essential to human survival when there's no other routes to do so. When the state fails, without a black market, there is no chance of survival,
For sure. So you're basically saying that like black market is kind of a true free market in that sense, and that it has to adjust incredibly fast to the needs of the consumers. That's the only way it can function.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example of the free market working fluidly, It fills the gap, the supply-demand. It could be a daily change in what is the demand for something, and that would be filled regardless. People will find a way.
Right on, yeah. And of course, a lot of people know about how cheap it is and how a lot of people in Venezuela, we've done episodes on this on Humans of Bitcoin, that people are mining Bitcoin against the government's wishes, that I should say emphasize corrupt in all caps in bold and underline in the Venezuelan government right now. I mean, people are mining Bitcoin in order to stay alive.
Yeah, they are. But I mean, Venezuela, the black market there is a prime example of why it's necessary to have such things. I'm not going to make a stance on who's right or wrong in terms of the political situation there, but it's clear that the citizens of Venezuela have no recourse to state sort of funds, nor state food, nor any sort of resources, so they've resorted to their own black markets. Mostly in money, actually. I think the dollar's now become basically de facto currency. I don't think the bolivar really accounts for anything anymore. So it's really the currency black market that keeps things going there.
Yeah, and I think Argentina, I think around the world, many countries, you have to trade currencies on the black market because the official rate, the dollar to a official state currency, is just impractical as well. I mean, you don't really get any of your money's worth. So you're right. It's just another example of how it's the glue that keeps the world economy going. And you also mentioned cigarettes before we started recording. Cigarettes and alcohol, that's a huge black market industry. You could probably talk about a lot of industries, but cigarettes is huge. What else?
Yeah, we talked about wine last week, which actually I wasn't so aware of how huge the black market is in wine. It's worth $100 billion alone.
Yeah.
So nothing is spared from the true free market.
For sure. Gambling, money laundering, tax evasion. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Let's say illegal internet connections. I mean, yeah, it's stealing cable.
Yeah, I mean, things like I can sort of tell this account of, let's say, an acquaintance of mine who used to be doing some highly illegal things on a large scale. But for doing that, he needed a lot of electricity and a source that wasn't sort of linked to the main channel or the main grid in the UK. And yeah, I mean, basically just the black market electricity is where you just go through, bypass the box, and straight into the grid without any sort of counter. That's really common as well. Not just in illegal mining activities, but illegal growing facilities, shall we say, as well, in different fields of work. So it's everywhere. And coming back to the UK and cigarettes and alcohol, the UK can provide for its citizens the resources, and it has infrastructure to provide cigarettes and alcohol whenever you need them. Well, until 10 o'clock if you're in Scotland, because we're banned from buying alcohol after 10 o'clock because we're not obviously seen upon as quite responsible enough to drink after 10 p.m. in Scotland. But the point being is we can buy this stuff, but there's still a huge market for fraudulent or counterfeit cigarettes and alcohol. Why is that? It's because it's too expensive. No one wants to pay 80% tax on a 20 deck of cigarettes, so I'll pay, I don't know, £4 or £5 instead of 11 to a guy who's imported them illegally. I'm breaking the law, but of course at that stage many people just feel like they don't care anymore. Things are too expensive. I want to smoke my cigarettes. I don't care if I'm breaking the law. I'm pretty sure everyone on earth is probably attributed to some sort of black market law breaking. I think that's fair to say. For
sure. Whether or not they know it consciously, yeah. I'm sure we all have. It's just, I think that's a fact. So we've concluded everybody. I think we painted a pretty good picture of it.
Yeah.
And black markets online, right? There's using Tor and other kind of anonymous networks. A lot of these black markets function online or encrypted chats, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously at this stage in the show, we usually do the blockchain disruption section. And blockchain has, in some regards, disrupted the black markets. But when you look at the figures, actually, it's really not made any inroads at all. I think 0.01% of black market transactions globally are done via places like, or places that were like Silk Road or Dream Market or Wall Street. So blockchain's really given a certain transactional liquidity and also the global liquidity. You can basically buy from anywhere now. You don't have to meet someone in person who may be extremely shady. Well, they may not be, of course, but they may be extremely shady and dangerous, whereas now you can go online and you can basically get anything you want delivered to you. From a personal sense, you've kind of negated your own likelihood of getting robbed, stabbed, murdered, scammed. So it's provided a certain sort of democracy to black markets and safety as well.
For sure. Let's talk about the blockchain disruption. Like you said, right now, it's still a very small part. But you mentioned the blockchain, right? This distributed ledger. Cash is a lot more anonymous than, let's say, the Bitcoin blockchain. But Monero, Zcash, Pivx, there's a lot of anonymous coins with anonymous blockchains. So you're getting the best of both worlds. You're able to purchase online and have the safety of getting things delivered to your house instead of meeting some sketchy person at a gas station. And these transactions, if done correctly, cannot be traced.
Yeah, true. And I think just bringing up what you said there, potential for violence, this is one of the main things that the blockchain's allowed. Not just Tor. Tor, of course, is really the key to any of these dark markets, and we can go into that at great length, but I don't think we need to at the moment. Tor, for our listeners, is the onion router. It's basically a way to access the deep web, the part of the internet that's not indexed. This is a program you need to get on there, and this is also the program you need if you want to browse any of these markets that we're discussing. But
Like the Silk Road was through a tour.
like the Silk Road, yeah. I mean, the Silk Road's probably the most famous one, although, in today's standards, it was quite small. But yeah, I mean, the Silk Road was really the kind of start of blockchain, actually. One of your writers at Bitcoin.com, one of your best writers, Kai Sedgwick, wrote a piece about this where he basically underlined the fact that Silk Road did more for blockchain than blockchain did for Silk Road. And I completely agree with that. If it hadn't been for Silk Road and for Ross Ulbricht and people like him on the Silk Road, Bitcoin would probably still be doing very little, actually. It was really the Silk Road that got the first bubble going, with people being able to use it for something, albeit drugs and illicit substances and so on. At the end of the day, I'm a libertarian and I believe that people can buy and do what they want as long as they aren't harming anyone else, which was the ethos of Silk Road at the time. It was very much that. So yeah, blockchain's essentially given people a securer and safer route to get anything they like. I mean, it doesn't have to be illegal. There's people who buy cancer drugs via the dark markets that they can't afford in America. These $700 pills, which you get from your pharmaceuticals or your terrible health plans in America, you can get them from India for 5 cents. And you can get that via the dark markets, for example. So they serve a lot of purposes, not just to get people high or coke and hookers. It's a lot of stuff.
For sure. Let's see. So really, I guess we're talking about decentralized markets, right? And decentralized marketplaces are starting to come up. These are networks that don't have I guess Silk Road did have a central point of failure and can be shut down, but there will be truly decentralized markets. And I think this is another benefit of using blockchain technology along with anonymous cryptocurrencies. So I'm going to give you the task, Stuart, the difficult task. Explain what is a true decentralized market and what are the benefits of it?
The centralized markets would be something very simple like your local newsagents. That might be a market which is your only place to get any sort of food or beverage or resources. One day that might go up in flames and your market is gone. Decentralized, one of two or many of these hypothetical markets could go up in flames, but you would still be able to carry out the transactions from the ones that haven't. So it allows basically a far more secure and distributed market, which is censorship resistant as well. You can't take them all down. They can keep popping back up. They can move. And users can basically rely on these to carry out whatever it is they want to buy.
Makes sense. So I guess unlike the Silk Road, there's no central point of failure. So you talk about Open Bazaar, like Open Bazaar, could that be shut down?
I suppose it could if you really went to the effort of finding. I think this is a sticky one because when it comes to any type of censorship and law enforcement powers, my personal feelings on this whole sphere is if they really want to get you, they will. Most of the time it's a case of they might not have the resources or they don't really care enough. But I think Silk Road was an early example of if they really want to get you and make an example of you, they will. And, the law enforcement went to all sorts of nefarious tactics to do that. So they are safer, and Open Bazaar is a far more difficult thing to take down. But I wouldn't want to stay here say that it's impossible because I believe that tentacles of law enforcement are extremely long.
Yeah, they're quite advanced in the way they do it. And we don't have to get stuck on the word decentralized. They're definitely more decentralized than a centralized, Amazon.com. It's a platform that allows anyone to sell what they want, right, without restrictions. And Open Bazaar, right, which is really interesting. You have to download the software, but you can buy and sell art, buy and sell anything you want there.
Again, we're talking about black markets here and decentralized markets and darknet markets. However, I think it's important to add that these can be used for all sorts of products and they can really cut out middlemen, they can cut out a lot of bureaucracy, they can cut out a lot of issues. Although we're using the term blacknet market and decentralized, it is really for everything. As you say, things like art. It could be for books, rare books. It could be for games, from Mega Drive games from the 90s or so. It could be anything. So yeah, Open Bazaar is really a free, sell what you want. Anything you want, you can sell it, good or bad. I think they probably have some restrictions, much like the Silk Road did. No weapons, no guns, no child pornography and such like that. But yeah, it's the new model, and I think it's going to become the future. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't.
For sure. And thinking of more benefits, obviously paying with cryptocurrencies. If you don't have a bank account, again, that's just a benefit for all cryptocurrencies. Sometimes you don't want people to know. In a place like Venezuela, you may not want people to know that you're buying, X item. So it can protect you from corrupt governments. What else? We talked about the location part, the decentralization of these markets.
So yeah, we could add into this another factor, which is, interesting to talk about. But actually, in the drugs trade, as we've mentioned, it lowered violence hugely because you don't have to meet shady characters, for example. But also it heightened the quality of product. So all these darknet markets, some of the substances that were captured by police were all tested and found to be highly pure. So actually, it saved lives by giving what was stated on the label as well. I can't actually see any disadvantages to such things. People are going to take drugs, for example. They're always going to do that. They always have. The war on drugs in America has been a terrible failure, to the tune of $1 trillion for that remark, not to mention how many people are being incarcerated for no reason or for little reason. But at the end of the day, people are going to take drugs. So if you can provide them with a quality guarantee, they're more likely to go to you.
Because an Amazon-like review system, right?
Yeah.
That's huge, because if you and I were going to use like a Shopify and start using a bank account selling these drugs, we get shut down. So, the darknet market really is the only way to do that unless drugs were legalized. But of course, there's always going to be certain items that are deemed illegal by certain governments. I think that's inevitable, at least for the foreseeable future. To finish up here, Stuart, how do you see this playing out? Will online darknet markets get bigger over the years?
Yeah, definitely. I think coming back to what you just said a second ago about legality, more important now is the point of history is not just legality, but morality. Many of these things we class as illegal, such as marijuana in many places, but in general it's accepted socially as not really being that bad. It's not that immoral, really, is it? So we're now in this point in history where legality and morality are starting to really clash, and morality is going to take over these ideas, these traditional ideas we've had in the past of what's illegal. And we're seeing that around the globe in the Western states, especially. Portugal have legalized a lot of drugs, and they've seen great benefits from such things. America has already decriminalized or legalized in Colorado, I'm not sure, and California, things like marijuana, which they're now taxing and actually making loads of money off. So dark markets are going to function to basically pull the traditional markets, the governments, the states, into this acceptance of a new morality and action and outlook on things like drugs and things like illicit substances, because we have to. Dark markets are here to stay. And providing privacy coins, things like Monero and PIVX, like you mentioned, Zcash, providing they stay true to their word and they're not in any way assailed by the American government, it's most likely the NSA or such who are going to try and break these, then we have the means to do that and provide a truly sort of libertarian free market system, which is, in my opinion, what humanity is striving towards in the market.
This is Sterling Lujan, ambassador for Bitcoin.com. Make sure to listen to the Humans of Bitcoin podcast, stories from people around the world whose lives have been changed by Bitcoin. New episodes every Tuesday.
I think, in summary, the benefits of e-commerce for all types of bright and legal versus dark net markets, e-commerce has really changed things for convenience. You're getting the convenience, the review system, the peer review system of that, all of that, plus being able to buy things that you don't have access to, so more access to markets, faster transactions, and censorship-resistant transaction. It's hard to say exactly how it's going to develop, but it's definitely play a bigger role. I also agree. I don't know if it's going to be open Bazaar, or if it's one market sets up, then it shuts down. And I'm sure this is already happening, but via encrypted messengers like Signal, maybe Telegram secret chats, web chatting messenger type services as well. A combination of things.
Even in the ClearNet, people are using all sorts. You can buy weed on Snapchat, for example. In the UK, things like Snapchat are used heavily. Even Reddit have boards for this.
This is true.
The cat's really out of the bag. The internet has already destroyed any chances of a so-called war on drugs. But just to add and to close from my side, something I wanted to point out is, I'll give you a more terrifying scenario than having black markets. And this is, for example, in Sweden, by the year, I think it's the year 2025, they plan to phase out cash. So they basically want to go to a purely digital economy where plastic is a king, really. There will be no cash. So in a moment like that, if we don't have decentralized markets or privacy coins that serve their function, that's about as totalitarian and terrifying as one can imagine. When a global state basically has control over your finances, your bank, and can turn it off at the switch of a button. I'm going to buy milk. No, you're not. What do I do next? There's no cash. So Sweden's just the test bed. This will happen in many countries, Western countries in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So just to close on that, this is really important for those reasons as well. When we move into purely digitalized economies and there is no cash.
That is a great point. The 1984 state, more and more control of governments over your money, which will increase the need for these kind of anonymous currencies and online dark markets. So blockchain will help with the privacy transaction ledgers.
The paradox of that is the blockchain will actually be functioning on both sides.
Yeah.
One side of the blockchain will be working for the government, immutable ledger that can never be broken or hacked with every single transaction you've made. And then we'll have the other blockchains, which are the ones that are actually securing you by using privacy coins and such like. So the blockchain will probably function on both sides in this case, both to the totalitarian side of things, such as a centralized Bitcoin, or in the libertarian, or whatever you want to call it, free market side of things.
Great point, man. Well, hey, Stuart, what are we covering next week?
What are we covering next week? I think we settled on real estate, right?
Yeah, real estate, property deeds. There's probably some of that on darknet markets as well. But hey, man, enjoy your trip into countryside of Serbia.
Into bear country. Yeah, sure.
I'll see you next week, man.
Nice one, Matt. It was a pleasure, and you have a good one there too.
Okay, great.
Thanks for listening to the Bitcoin.com podcast network. To learn more about our shows, visit Bitcoin.com/podcast. Bitcoin.com podcast network.